Just Business with Steve Thomas and John Worrell. And now, here's your host, Chris Leary.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media industrial business complex, or at least at whatever shape it is currently in. I am joined by, I don't know what the hell you people are, but I'm joined by John and Steve. How are you doing today?
I got a coronavirus test last night. Just to see.
They swabbed the back of your eyeballs?
Yeah, they did. And I don't have it. I'm fine. And, it was more of an abundance of caution, thing than to sort of show two people that it's okay to get the test kind of thing. But yeah, I was like, look, don't show me the probe. Just do it. That was my, I didn't want to see how long the thing was. And it felt like somebody stuck a finger in my brain. In which for my brain, when it's as small as mine, you don't want to mess with it.
A long finger.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it was okay. It only took a few seconds and it was over. And but that was my big excitement of the week, probably.
I've had it done a couple times now. I'm really glad this is the second time in a row I get to be on the show about dollars and cents, which is great because this is a show that doesn't make any dollars or any cents.
It makes money. It just goes all back. It doesn't make profit. It makes money, not profit. There's a difference.
Yeah, those are business terms. They don't belong here.
It's a show about business, John. What are you talking about?
There you go. Excellent. I've done the COVID test several times now. I'm past the all the cancer stuff for the moment, which is great. But during that time, I was deep into chemo and things like that, and so they're testing you pretty often because I was high risk, and so yeah, the backs of my eyeballs are cleaner than they've been in years.
Well, quite frankly, John, also you have a nose that you really need to dig deeply to get up there in it too.
Well, it's true. The nice thing is you can fit a small child up my nose. So the next time they're just bringing in the dwarves.
Chris, have you had the swab your brain test done yet?
I have not. My wife has had the antibodies test for whatever very little good that means or does or is, but and was negative. But we've been pretty well isolated. But I'll probably. We've started to invite in some guests, so at some point I'm going to have to get something.
Well, see, John or Chris, you're way up in the middle of nowhere. In the middle, you're like, like the show Mountain Man on History Channel. That's you. You're way up there, so I think you are in much less risk than those of us in big cities.
He's on a delayed
risk.
Yeah,
for sure.
The thing about living out in the rural country is that everything reaches you just later.
Yeah, and we're close enough to New York City to have been pretty harrowing here for a little bit, but we shall see. Strange times. I'm on a waiting list for a hazmat suit, so.
So I've worn a lot of hazmat suits in my life, unfortunately. In my former days as a military officer, I've worn many a chem warfare suit, and it's just something you kind of get used to. They weigh a lot. When you take it off, it feels like you took a weight off your back.
Because you did.
Yeah, because you did. Yeah, because you did
right,
take 30 pounds off it. That's true. It's a good workout.
It's the public health equivalent of swinging two bats on the on-deck circle.
That is kind of how it feels. That's very true.
All right, so that brings us back to sports, I guess, because we're going to talk about NASCAR first, which
is that a sport?
In the sport, no sport. I'm on the no sport side of that one, but be that as it may, let's talk about the controversies in the air quote sport that was literally invented by running from the cops.
Just before we get started, I think I want to point out I'm the only person in America that believes that both NASCAR and soccer are sports.
I think NASCAR's a sport.
You got a hat trick, buddy. You add esports.
Add esports. I'm in it. Everything's a sport to me, man.
That's where you lose me. Esports is not a sport. You cannot sit in front of a video game and call that sports. It's not. It's a game.
I welcome everybody. I'm all about the love over on this side.
I do think NASCAR. I do think it's a sport. It's not that an athletic endeavor, but I think it's a sport. But
try
the controversy this week obviously was a major national story. Bubba Wallace, who is a driver with NASCAR, I would say objectively a mediocre driver, probably in terms of his success and whatnot. His crew reported that somebody had hung a noose in their garage at Talladega, which is in Florida. The Talladega race was just last week. To set the stage, at least at Talladega, all of the garages are in one gigantic building, and everybody kind of has a spot and a slot, but there are no walls. And so you could walk between every car if you wanted to. So the crew reported there was a noose. NASCAR came out with a statement immediately within like hours that said exactly what I said. There was a noose and we're investigating it, and hate crime is awful. The FBI rolled in with 15 agents, which I'll get to that in a minute. But the FBI determined that it was not a hate crime, and the thing was just a rope hanging from a garage, and it had been there for 9 months. And after that happened, Bubba Wallace actually kind of doubled down and went on a couple media shows and said, no, it was a noose. And then 24 hours later, came back and said, well, I'm glad it wasn't a hate crime, and all the love that was shown me is a good thing. What had happened was the day of the Talladega race, all of the NASCAR drivers and all the pit crew people all came out in a big group and pushed his car to the front in a show of unity, which certainly was a good thing. To me, this is a case study in what not to do and how not to act when you have a potential problem. So I could go on forever about it, but I won't. I will eventually. But guys, what did you think about this NASCAR situation?
Did you see the picture of the rope?
I did.
Yeah, that by any stretch of the imagination, that looks like a noose to me. It might not have been, right? It's possible somebody fashioned a rope exactly in that way to use as a door pole or whatever they're saying it was. But that seems like an odd way. If I had to attach a rope to a door in order to pull it down, I wouldn't tie it exactly like a noose. So I think that it was a noose. Whether it was intended for Bubba Wallace or not, if it's been there since October or whatever, then maybe it wasn't. Maybe it wasn't a hate crime. But that was pretty definitely a noose in my eyes.
Well, I mean, look, the FBI spent an abundance of resources on it. First of all, 15 agents is dramatic overkill to me. But the FBI said it wasn't a hate crime. The FBI is the preeminent investigative agency in the world. They are very, very good at what they do. And you got to go with it. Whether or not it was a slip knot or not, I don't know, but certainly it looked like a noose.
Yeah.
But
I'm not saying the FBI was wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying it looked like a noose to me.
The more interesting part of the story here to me is how NASCAR handled up front. I'm highly critical of the way NASCAR handled it. NASCAR up front should have said something to the effect of, we have an allegation of a hate crime. We are investigating. We hope it's not true. We stand by our driver, but we'll see what it's all about. Instead, they just came right out and said, this happened. This was for sure a hate crime. They didn't even send a picture of it out. They just said, trust us, and this happened. And then they had to backpedal out of it, and they scared a whole bunch of people. What you don't do up front in a situation like this is just conclusively say this was and this happened. They didn't say that at all. It should have been that we have an alleged incident brought to us by one of our crew members. We will investigate it. We will see what happens, and we definitely stand by our people. That's how to handle, and that's how they didn't handle it, and that's what I was most critical of.
Chris?
It's hard to disagree with Steve at the point where did the most intelligent of PR minds handle that 48-hour period at NASCAR's central office?
Right.
That's hard to disagree with Steve there. What I would say is a few things. One, I'd say the reason they overreacted or reacted too quickly, or however you want to classify that, is because NASCAR has a deep problem here, and so I guess I understand their rush to press release, we'll call it. So, I mean, let's not forget, I believe it was the exact same race weekend or race structure or series of races. Again, I could give one wit about NASCAR. I would easily rather watch a Overwatch sports competition, personally. But someone flew a Confederate flag right over the raceway saying defund NASCAR. So
I think that was in response, right? Because they had just banned the Confederate flag.
They banned,
and that happened first
so
before the noose, right?
Yes.
Right. I'm just saying, I don't have to go very far to find other very concrete, overt examples of what NASCAR's problem is, or what they perceive it to be, at least, and why they overreacted. So, that's the world we live in. Overreaction, hot takes galore, not just randos on Twitter, but corporations. So I don't know. It just seemed like another Tuesday, basically, to me.
Well, maybe people need to stop overreacting and stop having a bunch of hot takes. How about that? Look, I was fine with NASCAR banning the Confederate flag if they want, at their facilities and with their crews and on their cars and whatnot. I wasn't quite so wild about saying the fans couldn't, have it. It's by the way, it's not a freedom of speech issue. It's private property. It's a private company. It's nothing to do with that. But I don't know why you're trying to control the fans, and there's nothing wrong with Southern culture. If you're from the South, great. I get it. And the Confederate flag means different things to different people. Personally, I'm not a Confederate flag guy. I think NASCAR probably went one step too far with the Confederate flag stuff. But to me, none of that excuses scaring the entire public. And by the way, if you hear noose, you need to assume it's fake. Okay? If the word noose comes out in the media, it's fake. Always. If you go back in the history of noose cases in the past many years, 100% of them are fake. There is not a legitimate noose case that you will find. I promise you, I've looked at all of them. All of them I could find, they're all news cases are either completely fake.
Let's clarify. There's no true news stories that are empty nooses. There's plenty of true news stories with necks on them.
Well, if you want to go back decades and decades, what I'm saying is the alleged hate crimes that have come out in recent years, all of them that involve a noose have all been either complete hoaxes or misidentifications. The last one was 3 weeks ago. A guy hung 2 ropes in a park, and those were alleged to have been hate crimes. And well, it turns out he hung them there for exercise purposes, and it was an African American that did it. Point is, you will not find a legitimate hate crime involving a noose out there in the past many years.
No,
they're always fake.
Empty noose. An empty noose.
Well,
I can find plenty of examples of real hate crimes with necks in the nooses. That's my point.
Well, not in recent years, but not in recent decades.
Do you know all the facts about there's been 6, I'll go even conservative. I think I'll go with the low end. There's 5 hung black males in the last 10 days. One is a confirmed suicide. Lots of them have been classified suicides. And that's just the last 2 weeks. So, yeah, do people misidentify nooses, or are they pranks or whatever? Okay, sure, maybe. But my point is that the long history of actual necks being in nooses hung from a tree is not a false story.
Oh, no, for sure. Of course it's happened. Absolutely. And there's a lot of, there's a definite racial component to it. I get it. But the fact of the matter is, every reported hate crime in which somebody allegedly leaves a symbol of a noose, all of them have been fake in recent years. That's my point. So I think NASCAR should have taken it. The smart thing to do with this would have been to take a step back. Number one, look at it and go, this damn thing is obviously a rope from a garage, and we should know that. Yes, it looks like a noose, but it's clearly a rope hanging from a door. NASCAR should have known that, and they shouldn't have scared the public immediately. I think when you have crisis management, soft pedal this thing until they're, say it's alleged, say we're going to investigate, and frankly, they should have known. They really should have looked at that and known what it was. And Bubba Wallace's crew should have known what it was, I think.
If I opened up a garage and I was a black driver and the Confederate flag had just been banned, and I saw what clearly looked like a noose hanging from it, I would have some reactions. I was surprised that he didn't immediately tweet that picture out. himself. But yeah, I think he did the right thing in going to the authorities, and I think it was the right thing for whether it was his decision, his crew's decision, his crew chief's decision, NASCAR's decision, whoever it was got the FBI involved, did the right thing. I agree. I think you can't really come right out and say, right off the bat, this was definitely a hate crime. It was definitely this. It was definitely X. I disagree with your assessment that there haven't been any real nooses in recent years, because if you
Find one. Give me a case. Find one.
Right.
I've looked at all of them. All of them I could find. I found all of them. I found none of them were hate crimes. Zero.
But based on it depends an awful lot on which site you're going to debunk these things. Because if you're going to a site that is right wing leaning, they're all going to get debunked. If you're going to a site that's left wing leaning, they're all going to be valid. If you try to find a site that's directly in the middle, it's hard to find, and you can almost always find evidence that is biased one way or the other. If you go to Wikipedia, you will see incidents where nooses was used. If you feel like Wikipedia is biased to the left and therefore not valid, then you can say that. But it is very hard in this day and age to say there have been no hate crimes involving nooses.
I'm willing to say it because, I think you know me well enough to know, John, I'm fairly objective about at least on this show, and I have not found one that's not been that's been legitimate. And point is, I think that as a result of all that, the mistake here by NASCAR was the way they handled it up front. It would have been completely different, a different reaction by the public at large had they said, we had an allegation, we need to investigate it, we stand by Bubba Wallace, period.
I think that they could have handled it better. I would agree with that. But I'm going to disagree with you on the idea that
fine.
There haven't been any.
Certainly fine.
Yeah. Like I already said, they could definitely have handled it better. My guess is the PR staff at NASCAR isn't super experienced handling racial-based issues, so that's an assumption on my part. One thing I find interesting, though, is I just can't tell when I'm supposed to believe the FBI or not. That's
another
show, but
I think if you don't believe the FBI, you're being foolish, because the FBI has a tremendous track record. Their investigative talent is unmatched by anybody.
They are very good.
They are very, very good at it. And there's a whole political side we could talk about, which I don't want to get into.
Independent is another question.
Yeah, but in terms of what I can attest to is their investigative talent unmatched. There's a whole lot of politics that have gone on that are beyond the scope of this show with regard to the FBI in recent 2 years, but that's another podcast.
Absolutely, it's not another show. It's another person's show.
Yeah.
Sure. Just find it odd when I'm supposed to believe the FBI and when I'm not. That's all I'm saying. All right. So next topic is we're going to head into the opt-out rules. If you don't know, you probably know what opt-out means generically, but in this context, as these sports leagues begin to reconstitute themselves, reboot their season, kick off seasons, all that good stuff, one thing that we've seen the NBA do, and you're seeing versions of it probably in other sports, is they set a opt-out date where I think in the NBA it was players could say, hey, I don't feel comfortable playing this season. I will, surrender that portion of my salary. And there's no penalty. There's no league action. There's I don't think team can't necessarily cut them, or at least state that is the reason they cut them. They have amnesty from those kinds of disciplinary measures, and we've seen some high-profile players already do that. I think I should have gotten this number, but I think it's something like a third of NBA players opted out. And there's lots of self-serving reasons for those NBA players to opt out, which we can discuss. But we also are seeing rumors as the NFL gets closer that they're going to have some kind of similar opt-out date for both coaches and players. And the coaches one there is interesting, just considering the average age of a NFL coach probably is a little bit on the older side. And Major League Baseball is also in negotiations about what their policy is. So this is seemingly, I imagine the NHL will follow suit if they haven't already. I imagine this is going to become a norm there's some kind of window for players to opt out of whatever version of this season, and for whatever reasons they choose. I personally think this was a pretty smart move by the NBA, just because it kind of gives everyone a pass and kind of wipes out a whole level of potential controversy and leaves it up to, freedom of choice, a good old-fashioned, ideal.
Well, why this is important is that ordinarily if a player refuses to play, he's in breach of contract. And then there's all sorts of financial ramifications with regard to that. So I do think it's a smart thing. And what this basically does is say hey, if you don't report, you're not in breach of contract. Basically you get a free pass and, come back next year. It's a pretty smart thing given the circumstances. Avery Bradley with the NBA is probably the highest profile player to opt out. And he said he did it because he's got a son with respiratory problems. And he doesn't want to risk his family's health or the health of the son, which is understandable. It's with my beloved Lakers. And so that kind of bums me out that we lost Avery Bradley. But I understand it. And Major League Baseball has kind of a similar thing. It's a smart thing. It's a way to defeat the breach of contract argument. That's all it is. And given the circumstances, sports probably ought to let people do it. So you may be disappointed that your team loses a player, but for the long-term health of the relationship between the owners and the various players' unions, definitely a smart thing. Because what you don't want to do is create more acrimony. Major League Baseball's already had a ton of acrimony. They don't need more.
I think one of the things we brought up a couple weeks ago on this show, I believe, was that when it comes to how the seasons are going to be shaped and how they're going to be formed, one of the things we talked about was who was taking the risk and who was not taking the risk. And I think that these clauses that you're seeing saying, okay, well, if you don't want the risk, you can opt out without any penalty. I think that helps bring a little bit more of the power back to the league in terms of getting to the bargaining table about how the seasons are going to look.
Well, yeah, what you don't want to do is say, yeah, we recognize there's a global pandemic here, but if you don't show up, you're in breach of contract. We're going to take your money.
Right.
That's not going to help when it comes to union negotiations. And Major League Baseball is coming up. Again, and I think if baseball proved anything in the past month, it's that they hate each other. And so what you don't want is to create. I mean, they do. They were talking about. I went over the numbers last time. They weren't talking about a ton of money between what the owners were willing to lose, and and what the players wanted. Really, in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't a lot. And they just could not agree. And at the end of the day, baseball is only playing because the owners unilaterally impose a season. There's no need to create more acrimony. If there's some players out there who've got Avery Bradley problems and have children or family members with respiratory problems or are otherwise immunocompromised, there's no reason to make that player play. The team will go on, I promise. They'll find somebody else and it'll be fine. So it's definitely a smart thing for the sake of peace and harmony between owners and management.
And doesn't it protect the leagues and or the teams? Because let's say something happens to a family member or to a player or a combination thereof, if they had an opt-out window and decided to basically opt in to the risk by playing, doesn't it also help protect the league from possible lawsuits if something happens to a player or family down the road?
Well, the player doesn't have a lawsuit. The player has a grievance under the collective bargaining agreement. If they believe that the league has done something that is contrary to its obligations under the collective bargaining agreement, you file a grievance. And so
I'm only asking this. I'm actually curious. I'm not debating. If a player's grandma dies, could the family be able to sue in that circumstance, or would they follow under the player's CBA process?
No, for sure. I mean, if grandma dies and grandma blames Major League Baseball, grandmas could file a wrongful death, or the estate of grandma could file a wrongful death suit. I don't know if there's a very good argument that they would win the lawsuit, but they would definitely be able to bring a wrongful death claim and say, look, my son or grandson or whoever it is participated in this activity with the league. The league was so incredibly negligent with regard to their handling of it that they are the direct cause of grandma getting coronavirus and therefore dying of it. It's possible. It's not I don't think that's a very good claim, but yes, it's possible.
I'm not weighing in much here because I'm taking notes just in case I become the grandmother of a baseball player.
I hope. I don't think you're going to become a grandmother. You might become a grandfather.
Nobody knows.
That's true. That's true.
No, I just think that's another. And then if even in that case, a strong defense would be player X opted into this risk, So I just think it's really that's why I just think this is kind of multidimensionally smart policy.
Oh, it is. And I think the estate of grandma would have a really tough time getting causation nailed down and saying, yeah, for sure I caught this because my son was in a locker room. Well, your son was also in 100 other places and could have caught it. And it's a tough case to prove, but you're right. I think it's another layer of defense because then baseball says, well, even if, first of all, we deny that we're responsible, but even if we are responsible, we gave your son or your grandson the opportunity to not do it, and he took the risk.
Yeah, he signed up for it.
Yeah. But that doesn't relate to grandma is the thing. Grandma didn't opt out of anything. But it's
got opted out against her will.
Yeah. So it's certainly it's
the
another
great opt out.
It's another it's another one for sure. It's another layer of defense.
What do we think about? And so we'll look at this through the guise of Wizard sharpshooter Davis Bertans, who did opt out, was a free agent, was probably looking at a pretty, especially with the wacky salaries in the NBA, was probably looking at a pretty healthy free agent contract, probably in the top half, if not top third of NBA salaries by the time he signed it. Now, and it's pretty clear that he opted out because, the Wizards have a, barely a chance to get that 8th seed. And why, so his motivation was, which might be perfectly valid, but I'm kind of curious what you all think. Why would I risk future earnings, and if there's an opt-out, even if my reason isn't I'm scared of COVID, it's to say, I'm going to put my arms and legs on ice and not do anything to harm future earnings. What do we think about players taking that avenue?
I kind of look at it the same way a little bit that I look at when players make the All-Star team and don't participate in the All-Star game. I sort of feel like the season that we're looking at coming up, assuming it happens as it's planned, I feel like it's almost an exhibition season for a lot of these guys, that it's not really, we didn't have 82 games or whatever to try to earn our way into the playoffs. We're just kind of ranked and go. And, is it really worth taking the time to get and stay in physical condition in order to play, to put on an exhibition that that really isn't going to, nobody's really going to care about this season at the end of the day anyway, statistically, because it's a hacked half-season nonsense thing. I think that the teams that are in position to possibly win a championship and get some kudos out of it have one view, but the teams that are, if you're a player on a team that is really just showing up because it's their job, then I really don't know that it's in their interest to participate as much.
I don't agree with characterizing the season as an exhibition season. The baseball might have that problem, but the NBA played 63 games. The Lakers are 49-14 right now, and so that's 63. And so they've played 3/4 of a season, already, and they're gonna play another 12 games? I think it is 12 or 13 games or something like that. Is this upcoming kind of tournament style finish? So some of these teams are gonna play 90% of the season as it is, and so I don't think that's the issue. But I think it's very cynical, but it's probably very smart. In answer to Chris's question, if the Wizards are completely out of it and they're not going to win anything and who cares, I need to get mine and protect my health. So even if I'm not really all that concerned about the COVID-19 issue, just me being able to stay healthy and get that big contract, I don't really blame him. I would be mad if I was his teammate. I wouldn't like it as a teammate because you're kind of putting yourself above the team. But individually, I don't really blame the guy. I wouldn't be happy as a fan or as a player. I understand, as a Laker fan, I kind of understand Avery Bradley's issue. Don't risk your son's health. I understand that. But if you just want to protect yourself, I probably wouldn't appreciate that as a fan, but I understand it as a player.
Yeah, I don't feel like we're too far apart on that. It comes down to, is it worth putting yourself at risk for, whether you call it an exhibition or not. And I don't think for the teams that are at the bottom of the pile that is necessarily worth it.
Yeah, no, I bring it up only because I think it does, as much as I think that these opt-out policies are smart, and we're going to see, it's not just this policy, other policies too. All these things do scramble this idea of competitive balance, right? I mean, all these sports leagues, and we have, in a totally normal world, we get issues with it. In fact, considering the Wizards are on record as saying they want to re-sign this guy, they probably, chances are good they would have shut him down for the final 8 games of the regular season anyway, So we see that kind of like end of the year, and every year in every sport we get that, like, our team's tanking, or these teams, it's not fair if someone's fighting for a spot and some team barely fields a team. So we get that anyway. But this does unlock a whole bunch of these kind of competitive balance type of issues that will arise.
Yeah, I mean, certainly some of the teams at the bottom would have tanked and, sat some of these players anyway. And you might be right. Maybe the Wizards would have done that, anyway. I just think if I were a player on this, I would probably view it as a bit selfish. Look, where the rest of us are out here, we're going to play. Why aren't you? That's probably how I would come out about it. But if I was his agent, college, this is happening in college football. There are a lot of the top prospects are now skipping bowl games. And they're skipping bowl games because they say it's a dumb exhibition. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't count for anything in standings.
I'm getting drafted anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I'm getting drafted anyway. And it's not any different. It's the same issue there. It's not any different whatsoever. It's a meaningless game. Who cares about the Citrus Bowl or whatever it is? And so I'm just going to go prepare for the draft. And it's kind of it is the exact same issue. Why should, like the Atlanta Hawks are 20-47. They're not going anywhere. Do they? I don't know. I think the Hawks are maybe out of it completely, actually. But, the way the NBA handled their comeback, it's everybody who the NBA viewed as being within striking distance of the possibility of making the playoffs plays. Well, most of those teams realistically have no shot. So why should they play? I understand the argument. I just don't think I would like it if I was a player. And that was my teammate.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So,
and the Wizards are the Class A example of that team you just described. I mean, they'd have to go. I think they'd have to win like 7 of 8, and Orlando would have to lose 6 of 8 or something.
Right.
I mean, it's the longest of shots.
Yeah, they're on the outskirts of the Wizards right now. Are 24-40. Even if they make the playoffs, they're going to get swept in the first round. So why should these players do it? I think the overarching point here is what Chris said up front, which is this is a way, it's a smart thing to sort of maintain peace and harmony between owners and union. Knowing we have to work together in the future, particularly baseball, which has had such a horrible time of it recently. Because it's not just all the owners. The players were unreasonable too. Both sides were unreasonable, wouldn't talk, communicated via Twitter, all of that. Why create another problem? Just let some of these players opt out. Again, your team will go on, I promise. It'll be fine.
And I just want to, this show's been going on for a good amount of time, a couple years, 3-4 years maybe, something in that neighborhood. So I just want to take a moment to mark a historical marker. This will signify the longest amount of sustained time, or maybe even cumulative time, we will talk about the Washington Wizards.
That's true.
So just, I want, someone start making the plaque or whatever, but there we go.
I think we have spoke more, I think Chris is right, we have spoke more about the Wizards right now today than we have in the cumulative history of this show. Yes.
That's true. Congratulations, Wizards. They've been waiting for this.
Because I bring up my beloved Lakers quite a bit on this show, and my go-to city when I'm talking about cities is always Milwaukee. for no reason other than it's just Milwaukee.
Why
But
not?
yeah, exactly. Why not? Do you want to be in Milwaukee? No, not really. Who wants to
They
be in
need
Milwaukee?
something.
Yeah, the people of Milwaukee don't want to be in Milwaukee. But yeah, the Washington Wizards, the perennial losers, that is the Washington Wizards. Hopefully we don't bring them up again.
Well, and this will be the close of this. It'd be funny because if somehow lightning struck and the Wizards were to grab that 8th spot, they would then have the honor and privilege of getting drubbed and beaten by the Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, I know, because I probably got to stop, because the Milwaukee Brewers aren't a bad team either. I probably need to find another city to use as my example, than Milwaukee. But it's just so easy to pick on Milwaukee. It really is.
All right. So, as we said, the NFL, I bet you when we reconvene in 2 weeks' time, we'll be talking about, we could potentially be talking about a similar opt-out policy on the NFL and what that looks like. And we've definitely seen a run-up here as the NFL season. Well, NFL off-season, the official things would have already been going on. This would actually be the dead time because it's the time between OTAs and mini camps and the official kickoff
This is
training
supposed
camp.
to be boring right now.
Yeah, exactly. But as we, kind of see some things get canceled, like OTAs and off-season workouts and all that good stuff, and we see the Hall of Fame ceremony end game now get canceled, we're getting closer to the reality of these teams returning. I think they hoped it would be, kind of as the curve was going down, and they spent a lot of this kind of the early COVID era being the only game in town, and that game was their off season, which is super interesting, and it was already very popular, but just kind of shot up. But we're starting to see and hear and read what this might look like, whether it's fans, no fans, whether it's opt-outs, whether it's health concerns, and we actually have seen some outbreaks in places like the Houston Texans and the Dallas Cowboys. I think there might be a couple others, but those were the two that were in the news. All the way up to and including mega superstars like what's that running back's name?
Ezekiel
Elliott. Yeah, I try to forget Cowboys.
We try not to mention.
Yeah. So I got a mental block. So it's really interesting. You're starting to get a lot more conversation about the NFL's return and how that'll look like. What are we thinking? How's our bet looking, Steve? Maybe we'll start there.
Oh, I think I'm going to win the bet. I'm still confident. We still didn't come up with terms of the bet.
Remind the users the listeners. Remind the listeners of what the bet is.
Well, the bet was
that.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
That there would be, as planned, the Monday night kickoff at 8:15 or whatever on the Thursday. So it really is about foot hitting ball. I mean, I could potentially win even 5 minutes before if official ran out blowing a whistle saying everything's off, right? So, but once the foot hits the ball for kickoff Thursday night, that's the line in the sand for the bet.
Well, yeah, and that's what did happen with the NBA, is they canceled a game while the teams were warming up on the court. So that could happen. Yeah, that's a bet, John. What we never could come up with was terms of what the winner would get. What somebody wrote in and said the loser needs to grow like a Ted Kaczynski style beard, and to which I said, well, that's great, but Chris would applaud that. And John, you have the same thing.
I think the correct answer is that the loser has to buy John a packet of Omaha Steaks.
Has to buy John. Yeah.
That's actually not a bad.
I think that's a fantastic
get behind that.
solution.
I'd do that.
See,
Omaha. See, I'll go with that because Chris, you threw out the idea of write a defense of either capitalism or socialism, and well, I wouldn't mind doing that. We're not publishing that on the site, and there's no point. So because we don't do politics on the site.
I'm happy to supply if it would help the bet or the site or the the Hogstein Network in any way. I would be happy to supply a picture of me eating said steak.
Well, we'll talk about this all in a bit. That's not a bad idea. Omaha Steaks. That's not a bad idea.
What are the stakes of the bet? And I felt.
Except, see, John's got it wrong. See, John's awarding himself the steak no matter what.
What are you talking about? I think that means John's got it right.
Look, here's the thing. The Hall of Fame game is dumb anyway, okay? Teams don't care about the Hall of Fame game. They don't even really want to play it. The NFL, the stadium in Canton, Ohio is a substandard NFL stadium. The field is substandard. It's only there for marketing reasons. I don't blame them for canceling the Hall of Fame game. It's stupid. I don't know why they couldn't have had a Hall of Fame induction ceremony.
I'll tell you one thing: Canton relies on that income heavily.
Oh, for sure they do. And maybe
it's hurting them bad that this has got canceled.
It is. I think I would be irritated if I was a Hall of Fame inductee and I lost my ceremony for a whole year. That would irritate me. I don't know why they couldn't have canceled the game and had the ceremony. You don't have to have 20,000 people in the stadium. You could have done the ceremony and let them say their piece.
Hall of Fame Zoom ceremony.
Yeah, you could have done it like the draft, and it would get 10+ national ratings.
They could have put it in the stadium in Canton, just not had people there, or had, every
Everyone
100
gets
people.
their own section,
or have their families there. I don't know what, but anyway, point is, I don't blame them for canceling the Hall of Fame game. The bigger issue, which is what we're leading to here, is what do you do about the preseason? Because there's been a lot of issues with the NFL with regard to the preseason anyway. Do you even need to have 4 preseason games? The owners love them because it's free money, basically. They make money off of ticket sales, and the TV rights are held by the individual teams in the preseason, if everybody didn't know that. So the owners love preseason games because it's a big money-making thing. Players don't like them. We've seen a ton of players get hurt for no reason in preseason games. The union and the owners have been talking for 2 years about limiting the number of preseason games anyway. The CBA addresses this. So don't be surprised if the NFL dumps some or all of these preseason games up front. I don't blame them. It's not a bad idea. I think that players probably need at least one game to play a little bit, and you need to see players in game context to make proper evaluations on rosters. But given the health crisis, I wouldn't be surprised to see them just dump them.
I don't disagree. I would. I'm sort of on Chris's side of this bet. I would be surprised if the impact is only to the preseason, and I say that because I feel like as a nation we're sort of moving into our second attempt at curbing the coronavirus. From the numbers, it looks like whether you want to blame testing or you want to blame whatever it is you want to blame, it looks like the number of cases every day seems to be a new record number of cases that are being discovered. So I sort of feel like we're in a way worse position right now than we were in, say, April, when we were first talking about how are we going to contain this thing. And since it is now the end of June and we seem to have gotten worse and not better, then it would surprise me if we had everything fixed certainly by August, when the preseason is supposed to start. That's 4 or 5 weeks away for us to get into a position where we feel like it's safe. Now, the one thing that I will say is going in favor of having the season start on time and the preseason go on schedule is that I think that between March and today, we've learned more about the virus. We've learned more about how it's communicated. We've learned more about how to control it. And so with that additional information that we have today that we didn't have in March, maybe we're a little smarter about how can we hold football games, than we were. But I don't think that they're going to figure it out in time to have a regular preseason. I think they may figure it out in time to have a regular season.
I think they could figure it out in time to have a preseason. This is a question of whether they want to. Why take the risk? I think I still would go to my deathbed saying there's going to be the regular season's going to happen no matter what. There's going to be the regular season on time. That's why we had this argument in the first place.
I hope Chris you don't watch it from your deathbed.
Well, yeah, let's hope not. Some people probably want me to be on my deathbed, but I don't.
Sure.
Here's what I think. I admit I hadn't felt great about my bet. I'm feeling a little bit better about it now. here's what part of my rationale has always been this: that their desire to have a regular season means that one of the tools that they have is a delay. Like kick it down the road a few weeks. So that's always been one of my rationale why I think that kickoff game is in jeopardy. And they gotta have some kind of training camp and probably have some kind of simulated game action, because it's just not the sport where you can throw everybody out there, first game, I think, be live bullets, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been my thinking. And if Steve tried to bet me that do I think games will be played, I would never have taken the no side of that. I mean, it's possible, but I think they will move mountains to get some games played, which is why I think actually delaying the season is very high up on their tool set there. But we'll see. But you're already, regardless of that issue, you're already seeing a good amount of chatter out there about what this is going to look like. How's this going to be? I know the Hogsty ran a fan, will there be fans? How will there be fans type poll? And you're starting to see players, including Ezekiel Elliott, who had it, tested positive, start to question the logic. And so the chatter, the discussion is just going to, get louder for sure over the next couple weeks on all angles.
Well, part of the other reason I feel the way I feel is there's a really big TV component to the NFL that doesn't exist for other leagues, in that these are major network primetime events. And there's a reason, the reason why the NFL starts in September isn't only because it's the fall. It's because also it's the kickoff of the fall television season. Networks really, really, really rely on the NFL. And that Thursday game is sort of the kickoff of the television season, the new television season in general. So I really think everybody involved will move mountains to make sure it happens exactly on time, even if there's not one person in the stands. I think it is very important to the TV networks to have the kickoff of the fall television season happen on time, exactly like it always has. That's why I think they don't want to kick the can down the road. It's because of the television aspect of it.
That's a good point. I mean, there's again, it's the I guess the motto of the show is, it always comes down to money, doesn't it? So, and there's an awful lot of money riding on it. Now, I do think that they would still see that money if the starting week got delayed. They'd still see the numbers, but I don't know, because it's been such a long time since I've had regular television or gave a damn about when the season started and ended, because everything I watch nowadays is on Amazon Prime or Netflix. Thank you, Amazon Prime and Netflix.
Sponsorship.
Thanks in advance, because we just hooked you up. At any rate, it's been such a long time since I've cared about when a show starts or ends that I don't even notice anymore that new things are coming in the fall, because also I feel like largely new things are crap. The end.
Yeah, you might feel that way, but a lot of people don't. And a lot of people care a lot, and advertisers care a lot about the kickoff of the fall network television season. They base their advertising campaigns on it. They advertise the new shows coming up, on football games. That Thursday feels to me like the kickoff of the annual kickoff of the television season.
They always have on that game. They're always panning the crowd and they've always got some TV stars planted in to talk so they can show the new show and all of that. But
and coincidentally, here's the star of NBC's new television program, who happens to be on
just
row
hanging out
one.
having popcorn. Yeah. Look at that. And I think one of the things, to Chris' point earlier, one of the things we talked about a couple weeks ago, because a couple weeks ago we were talking about the baseball season and what that was going to be, and what that was, and especially we talked about the fact that they couldn't move it on account of baseball needs to be played in decent weather, whereas football. Now maybe you don't want to play in 110 degree heat in Arizona, in the summertime, but. They could certainly play, through to May, and not have any problems weather-wise.
Yeah. I mean, you're saying kick the season down the road. I just
I'm
don't.
saying it's a large. They have the option in the way that baseball doesn't. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, that's the bet. I don't know if you're trying. Maybe you want to angle in on the bet as well, John.
I'm gonna already be buying myself steaks, so it doesn't make any sense for me to participate.
Okay. In other words, you're scared. I get it. That's fine. I win. So I don't know what we're concluding here. What we've concluded here is I think we all agree that the preseason is probably going to be in some truncated form at a minimum. I would be surprised if they do nothing at all. At a bare minimum, there's going to be scrimmages or something that's going to happen because you can't just, like Chris said, you can't just throw an NFL team out there, go with no preseason. That's not a good idea. So they'll do something, but it's not going to be normal. That's, I guess, my conclusion.
Do either of you guys feel like the response to the coronavirus is going to have an impact, or do you guys feel like whether states are on lockdown again or whether states have opened again, that doesn't really impact the NFL's decision, that they're going to be based a lot more on what they feel is feasible? Do you think that the corona, if it goes up or goes down, impacts that decision?
I think they're already ready to have no fans. Which they're probably now. Yes, that's obviously a loss of revenue, but like just with the way the TV contract is structured, getting games on television and honoring their television contract is job one. So I think the NFL, like they've been figuring that these weren't going to have fans, and I think they're totally fine to proceed that way. So I think that means that some of those restrictions are probably not as in, if you're not bringing in 75,000 people or whatever, then it's a different, and you can manage it basically teams, players, and broadcast staff is your folks that are coming in. That's not even a contingency. I think that's what they're figuring is going to happen. So I think in that case, they probably can convince enough of these locales to let that go. Also, open air is the greatest thing, is the greatest healant at this point, the greatest mitigating, a greatest safe thing. So
other than sunlight and bleach.
Right.
Well, yeah, what we talked about last hour on the Hog Side was that this isn't going to be up to the NFL in certain respect. Different state governors handle this differently. Gavin, the idiot governor of California, because he is a freaking moron, Gavin Newsom is not going to allow fans in stands. I think
it's the second noose-related statement that I'm disagreeing with you on.
He's a complete moron, and he doesn't deserve to be the governor. But on the other hand, there's going to be other states that are going to allow fans in stands to a certain extent. So the NFL is going to have the decision made for it in many different locations. So the real question is, and this is what the focus of the poll was, is how does the NFL handle as a league? You could say, okay, each team to the extent you can, do what you want. Whatever the government lets you do, have as many people as you can. Or the NFL could say, as a league, we're going to make a policy decision that says no fans at all, or somewhere in between. It's just but the league's going to have its hands tied by the local governments, no matter what they want. I think, like Chris said, they're ready for it. I don't think they're happy about it because it's revenue, but they're ready for it. And especially in the NFL, the television contract is so enormous that is by far the most important thing. So I think the owners will live with it. Even if they have not one ticket sold, they will live with it because there's so much money in the television contract. So they're not happy about it, but they're prepared to do it. And yes, Gavin Newsom is an idiot.
Gavin Newsom's the best thing that ever happened in California. The more important question. In terms of open air, I agree. The fact that it's played outdoor, you've got a much different situation. I think with
not every team has an outdoor stadium. By the way,
but it's big enough, that you're still talking about the virus is not lingering in the space of a room. It's not like a billiards tournament that's played in a bar somewhere where you've got everybody mingling and sharing breath.
It's funny that that's the example that popped in your head was a billiards tournament.
Well, I used to be a competitive pool player, so that's why that happened.
Know that. The things
Well,
I learn
there's
about John
so
Worrell.
many things that everybody needs to learn about me.
Sport, not a sport.
And also a sport, as it turns out. But again,
Oh, that's a sport, but driving a race car is not. Okay.
no, I said that the
Well, no,
driving a race car
John
is a
says that.
sport.
I mean, he's consistent. He's consistent.
It's a
They're
sport.
all sports.
Teasing Steve is a sport. Getting him worked up about Democrats. Yeah, so
It's easy to get worked up about. They're dumb.
And a lot of us participate.
Says citizen of Texas.
Where I was going, do you guys feel that there's any difference in the fact you think about baseball, the most interaction that you have between players in baseball is when a guy is like reaching first base and the first baseman's already there. When you have football, you've got immediately for starting out 10 guys massed together in a pile immediately on top of each other, which you would think sort of from a medical standpoint is a different experience to deal with than baseball. Do you guys feel like football players are at greater risk than baseball players due to the proximity and the contact and the interaction? Or do you feel like it's outdoors, or like that it's similar enough that it doesn't matter?
Listen, I couldn't care less about that. That's their problem. I mean, you're getting paid a lot of money, to take some risks and do things that other people don't want. That's, if you have an opt-out, like we talked about in the last segment, if you're worried about it, opt out of it. I have zero concerns about that whatsoever. That's entirely your problem. From my perspective.
Chris, is it entirely my problem?
Not your problem, the player's problem. It's not John's problem at all.
No, I passed up on football for a lucrative unpaid podcast career.
Yeah, there you go.
You're welcome.
I mean, I probably on a policy level don't disagree much. Of course, it's more risky, right? Like that's just you're spitting in each other's face by design. You're not just on like that's not really an opinion. But I probably don't disagree much with Steve in terms of, especially with an opt-out, that that is what it is, right? If everything's clear and you're choosing to jump through hoop risks, then you're clear eyes, full hearts can't lose. But
great reference.
But
hoop risks.
I know. But what I would say is where I am concerned about is that. And if I'm the league, I'm very concerned about it because it means you really have to know. Because let's say, you get a week and, you've got 15 down linemen that go down because they're spitting in each other's face by design. Then nothing threatens the league like that, right? So, that's an existential crisis to playing games. So I do think that the obvious elevated risk factor and just the fluid transmission part and parcel to football means that things like testing and monitoring are need to be at a pretty high level if they want to play games.
One of the things that we haven't talked about in terms of this as well is referees. Referees are by and large older. They are also directly in the mix, making lots of contact and in between everybody, and they don't necessarily have as deep a pool of reserves of people who are capable of refereeing at NFL quality. As the Redskins' defensive backfield showed last year, you can throw anyone in a uniform if the need is strong enough, and just put them out there. And, you don't even need to put a name on the back anymore. Just whatever, throw them in burgundy. But with the refs, if you're just throwing people in there as the refs get cycled through, it's going to impact your product.
Well, the refs suck in the NFL, first of all. They're terrible at their jobs, and they're terrible referees. I think they're easily replaceable. Their union is obnoxious.
The Gavin Newsom of sports is where we're going.
It's pretty hard to get lower than Gavin Newsom, to be perfectly honest with you. But I think the refs are easily replaceable. I'm not too worried about either. And by the way, the refs make a lot of money. Okay, they're also not hurting for dough, and for a part-time job like that, they're making a lot of money. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for them either. And it's again, they're opting in. If you don't want to do it, don't. They're even easier to get rid of, to replace. So I'm not worried about the refs.
Well, we saw an example of how it's not that easy to replace the refs when we had scab refs. So we
I
knew
don't
what
think
those
there's a
games
lot
were
of
like.
difference
So,
between the current refs and the scab refs, though. Personally, just me.
I don't know.
I thought
I remember watching those games.
it was
I
pretty
saw a
awful.
difference. Yeah. But there's the I just
It's
I
another
don't
opt-in thing with me. You want to do it, and it's your take the risk.
I sure. I just saying, but the NFL has got because Rudy Gobert shut down the world, right? If you get something that comes off of one of these games, it's gonna shut down the NFL. So I think from if the goal is to play games, things that you're gonna have to keep. Now, a couple players go down or whatever, I don't think they pull the plug. But if you get something that starts to look like a trend, I'm serious. If you get something that looks like a trend, that's the biggest existential threat to them playing games.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, I understand. It's a higher risk in the NFL of any communicable disease than in other sports. Certainly, like John said, baseball. There may be an interaction at the plate. You're going to be next to people standing on base. But in the NFL, you're hitting each other, you're falling on each other, you're grabbing each other's private parts in piles. All of that.
Where did you play football?
Have you not been a down lineman, John?
No, I have not. I mean, I'm a big fan of Robbie Duncan, but no, I'm not an habitual crotch grabber.
Clearly, there's a higher risk of playing football, of catching any communicable disease, whatever the case may be. So, yeah, obviously they need to have, higher standards in place and whatnot. But also, again, we're talking about September. What the world looks like in September, is not going to be the same as it is in June, for sure. But they'll have to have, higher standards in place and testing and all that stuff for sure. Definitely. And they do have a risk.
Yeah, and I just think that and I'm sure, believe me, that no one doubts that the NFL is moving everything they need to move to mitigate that risk. It's not like they're going to walk cavalierly in that. They know that a bunch of players go down after, on Tuesday after Sunday and they got a problem. So they're figuring it out, and they'll do the best that they can, I guess. And just like September isn't going to look like June, December is not going to look like September. And so, this isn't going to, there's no magic line about when this goes up or down. And the baseline thing on that is just really very little impactful information or solutions to this pandemic.
We talked
barely understood and barely able to be treated.
We talked about at the top of the show that Steve and I both had the COVID test done. I'll tell you, just the very idea of being subjected to that on a frequent basis would be enough for me to opt out.
Hey, there's some people that are getting it
horrible, man.
There's some people in senior government positions that are getting it done every day.
Oh, I know. Yeah, no, it's not a fun experience for anybody who doesn't like having their scalp massaged from the inside.
It's kind of a nasal rape.
Oh, it's awful.
No, I wouldn't want to do it every day either. But also, I would tolerate it if I was going to make seven-figure salary. I would do it every day.
For 7 figures, I would consider it. I'd consider it. A high 7.
You'd consider it.
I'd consider it. I'm not hurting for money, Steve.
That's a lot of money, man.
I've had a long, lucrative career doing nothing, slacking off, and barely getting my bills paid.
But seriously, this is
really
what it always
that test.
This is what it comes down to, though, right? It's the lure of money. What kind of risk are you willing to take to make a lot of money? The owners, who themselves are taking no risk, are willing to have games come hell or high water. The players, who, for the most part, unless you're Johnny Manziel, do not come from wealthy families. They come from average to below average income families. They're willing to take a whole lot of risk to make the money, and that's what it always comes down to. That's why the theme of this show, it's always about the money. That's what all this is about, the money. How much risk are you willing to take to make a lot of money? Athletes by nature are risk takers. Pro athletes by nature are risk takers. And I think That's why I think everybody's going to move hell or high water, move mountains to make the season start on time. They're going to move mountains to have football games. They're going to submit to daily testing or whatever the case may be. All of that because there was a ton of money at stake.
I think Chris is winning the bet, but I agree with you that they're going to want to start on time.
Sounds like you need to man up and make a bet, John, yourself.
I will send myself steaks.
Okay, fair enough.
If the season starts on time, I will reward myself with a lovely dinner.
Okay, all right. Fair enough.
John is risk averse, we are learning.
John spent time in rural Thailand and doesn't give a damn about collecting money.
All right, with that, also another podcast. We'll bring this one to a close. Obviously, the NFL is going to give us story after story here, even in a normal world, but now in this bizarro world. So this is not obviously the last time we're talking about the NFL. Was the last time we'll talk about the Washington Wizards. But John, anything you want to tell the people?
I just wanted to let you know that if you guys want to get in touch with me, my Twitter handle is the word John, and then the letters WO, and then a random string of numbers. If you tweet to anybody and just let them know that you want it to get to me, I'm sure it will.
Guess he doesn't even know what his Twitter handle is still.
I don't know what my Twitter
and it really is a long string
you
of
can't
numbers.
Change it. So you're just stuck with what they give you, which nowadays apparently they just give you a long string of numbers. So I don't care.
Well,
if you want to get in
John,
touch
they do
with
give
me,
you the
I don't
opportunity to
care.
customize it when you create it.
Well, I tried to, but it didn't. There was no confirm that it will be this or anything like that. Just, okay, here you go, schmuck. And then I was slapped with this freaking penal digit at the end of my thing, and now now nobody can contact me. Not that, let's be honest, not that anybody cares.
I just think it's funny that John, someone who can build a video game physics engine in C++, can't figure out how to customize his C#, whatever. Can't decide to figure out how to customize his Twitter handle.
And
and I'm using Unity. I don't build the physics engine. But this is nerd stuff for another podcast.
Steve, tell us about the Hogside Network.
Okay, the Hogside Network, we are still going strong. We're still in off-season mode. The Hogside shows once a week for now. Seasons of Discontent is still down, but we'll be back once we get closer to the season. They'll be back in July, I think, sort of right before training camp. So that's that. And we still have all of our wonderful daily content out there, so check us out.
All right, you can find me at ChrisLarry33, and we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye.